Hello, everyone, and welcome back to CSI's monthly webinar series. I am Dove Horowitz, CSI New York's Director of Physical Security and Training Programs. For those of you returning, you're aware we host these trainings the first Tuesday of every month on timely and relevant topics to the Jewish community, focusing on security and those matters. So this month was an easy topic selection with the high holidays coming up just a few weeks away. It's hard to hit that sweet spot where it's not too far away, where you're not thinking about it yet, but it's too close where it's too late to do much. So on that note, we'll hear from two presenters on the topic of preparing security for the high holidays. We have Tim Terrell from our partners at the Jewish Federation of Northern New Jersey, and our own Bill Hayes, the CSI New York Director of Security for Westchester and the Bronx. If you have questions during the presentation, please put them in the Q&A, and we will try to get through as many as we can at the end, time permitting. And as always, these meetings are recorded and posted to our training archive, right? If you follow our training link on our CSINY.org page, you will see a link at the top of the page to our training archive for this session in a few days and all past trainings. We've noticed over time that we get more and more colleagues and partners and organizations from around the country, and we figured it's time to open this up to some of our very close partners who live and breathe and march like we do. So with that, we have our first segment today from Tim Terrell, from the Jewish Federation of Northern New Jersey, not too far away, but similar, works in the similar world like us. Real quick before Tim begins, Tim Terrell retired in November of 2021 as a detective captain, first grade, from the Englewood City Police Department in Northern New Jersey after a 4-decade career. He was the department's IOC and bureau commander during his last 12 years of service and was also a police academy instructor, a municipal counterterrorism coordinator, and an organized crime investigations expert. Tim specialized in the fields of bias crimes against religious groups, the effects of domestic violence on minors, and the criminal use of drones and other crimes targeting abortion facilities. Tim was also a member of NYPD's Torah task force in the late 1990s. Very interesting, and you might hear a little bit about that as well. All right, with that, I turn to you, Tim, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Just so you know, I'm a Brooklyn boy at heart, born and raised in Brooklyn. My accent has been diluted from North Jersey a bit, but anyway, good afternoon, everyone, and I want to thank again our close partners at CSI for inviting me to speak from across the wilds of the Hudson River. Before we dive into preparation for the high holidays, I want to just take a moment to highlight something essential about this thing we call the Jewish Communal Security Network, a network I'm very proud to serve as part of. As many of you know, our security ecosystem includes a range of organizations. Of course, CSI, our host, the Community Security Service, or we all affectionately know as CSS, the ADL, Jewish federations with directors like myself, JFNA, SCAN or SCN, and others. While each group has its own programs and presentations, we do operate with a shared mission, and we do so in unison. Much like law enforcement learned after 9/11, siloed efforts are just not enough. Our security directors and analysts communicate daily, exchanging intelligence, coordinating responses, and aligning strategies, all with one goal: to keep our Jewish facilities and communities safe, informed, and prepared. Whether you're leading a synagogue in Englewood, New Jersey, Englewood, Colorado, or even Englewood, Florida, the guidance you receive is rooted in the same time-tested methods and best practices. We understand the weight of this responsibility, and we're committed to delivering the highest standards of protection and support. With that foundation in mind, I'd like to share how my law enforcement background informs the work we do and what you as facility leaders can do right now to prepare for the high holidays. In my prior cop life, I spent decades working cases that range from bias crimes to counterterrorism to burglary gangs and high-profile synagogue incidents. What I'd like to do today is share a few stories from those experiences that you may not have heard before, and more importantly, connect them to practical steps you can take right now in the weeks leading up to the high holidays. My goal isn't to repeat the same old checklist, but to help you think about security in new and maybe unexpected ways. of course, reminding you of the basics as well. First, I'd like to discuss perimeter security. Let me take you back to the late 1990s. A synagogue in the city of Englewood, where I spent my career, as Dove said, was burglarized, and Torah scrolls, priceless and irreplaceable, were stolen. I was a brand new detective, and it was my first major case. It wasn't long before the investigative trail led me to NYPD's Torah Task Force, which primarily worked out of the Midtown North Precinct at that time. I was quickly made a member, and working with some of the greatest detectives I'd ever met, we thankfully made an arrest and recovered all the scrolls, breastplates, and crowns. But here's the part I always remember. That burglary didn't require a sophisticated attack. Weak locks, doors left unsecured, and little exterior lighting were all it took. And I'll never forget the stress and deep sadness that not only the congregation, but really the entire region felt in the aftermath. It really did hit the community at its heart. Think about it. What better way to attack the Jewish community now than to take advantage of poor perimeter security and remove the Torah scrolls, making them unavailable for the high holidays? And why does this matter? Because synagogues often focus on crowd control and greeter preparation in the first weeks of September, but neglect the basics, the perimeter. And yet the perimeter is the very first line of defense. So what can you do in the next few weeks? Walk the property in both day and nighttime conditions. Check to see if locks are working. Are bushes trimmed back from the building? Do the exterior lights cover entrances and parking areas? Sometimes the biggest deterrent isn't high tech. It's a lock that works and a light that's on. I want you to do what I did when I was a detective. Think like the bad guys. Another case, or cases I should say, that stands out in my career involved what was called the James Bond burglary gang. This multi-generational group of burglars were incredibly successful for years, breaking into high-end homes and businesses throughout New Jersey, New York City, Long Island, Rockland County, and beyond. Some homes even as far as Vegas. What made them so hard to catch wasn't the tools they used, it was the way they blended in. They rented luxury cars, dressed the part, and acted like they belonged in the neighborhoods they targeted. To the untrained eye, nothing looked out of place to the many neighborhoods they terrorized. I want you to picture your synagogue on Rosh Hashanah or Yom Kippur. Hundreds of people coming and going, many of whom you may not know personally. It's a sacred time, but also a vulnerable one. The sheer volume of foot traffic creates the perfect opportunity for someone with bad intentions to slip in unnoticed. That's why greeter and usher training isn't just helpful, it's critical, and it needs to happen now. Since October 7th, we've seen repeated attempts by bad actors to infiltrate Israeli real estate events using increasingly creative tactics. So we have to ask ourselves, why wouldn't they try similar methods to gain access to synagogues or other Jewish facilities in the lead up to and during the high holidays? Security today isn't about profiling appearances. It's about observing behavior. Does someone's story add up? Are they avoiding contact, acting nervous, or seeming disconnected from the purpose of the gathering? These are the kinds of cues we need to train ourselves and our teams to recognize. Executive directors, rabbis, and synagogue staff who are in and out of your buildings in the weeks before the holidays must be especially vigilant. Often before an incident occurs, bad actors engage in probing, walking the grounds, testing access points, or trying to blend in when security teams may not be present. These moments matter. Remember, keeping our synagogues safe is a shared responsibility. If you see something, say something. The takeaway here is simple. Don't rely on appearances. Trust your instincts. If something feels off, it probably is. And it's always better to speak up and be wrong than to stay silent and later regret it. Don't hesitate to bother, and I'll put up the air quotes for that, your security teams or local law enforcement. They understand the unique threats facing our community and are ready to respond. Your vigilance could be the difference. Another important step, let your local police train inside your facility. SWAT and patrol units are always looking for realistic training opportunities, and walking your hallways or reviewing your floor plan is invaluable, especially if your building layout has changed. This ensures first responders know exactly where to go if they're ever called. I know this firsthand from my own time on an emergency response unit. Those walkthroughs really do save lives. And remember, use your security directors like me, whose job it is to have strong connections to your local cops. We will get the help, the level of security and attention you need, especially if you are a new leader to your facility and they don't know you that well. And my last point to make is that the threats out there remain varied and evolving. During my time as a Detective Bureau Commander, I oversaw the Bias Crime Unit and also served as my department's counterterrorism officer. One of the lessons from those years is that threats don't come in just one form. We saw extremists in my city harassing and threatening medical staff at an abortion clinic with loud protests and sometimes violence. They would often try to gain entry under false pretenses. Starting in 2010, they began using drones to try to attack the facility and intimidate doctors and patients through second and third story windows. Sound familiar? It should, because today we see anti-Semitic groups adopting new tactics like this all of the time. Just recently, I was called to a fire at a congregation in my catchment area. Although it turned out to be accidental in nature, my first thoughts when I got the call at 4 a.m. was, is this another attack? Because years ago, that very same synagogue with the same rabbi and his family inside was tragically firebombed. I was actually part of a multi-jurisdictional task force at that time, and our work ultimately led to the arrest of 2 young adults, the kind of individuals you'd pass on the street and never suspect. The kind you'd look at and think, not them, no way. But that's exactly the point. Threats don't always look like threats, and that's why vigilance training and trusting your instincts matter so much. We've all witnessed heartbreaking attacks on our community, from the recent shootings in Washington, D.C., to the massacre at Pittsburgh Tree of Life Synagogue in 2018, and even back to the 2006 shooting at the Jewish Federation in Seattle. These events are painful reminders that vigilance must be constant, not just during the high holidays, but every day leading up to them. Also, as a part of being prepared, revisit your basic and emergency policies now. Are your bomb threat procedures up to date? Are you using best practices for live streaming services to avoid exposing your facility to unnecessary risk? Like having the cameras set at the correct angles, focusing on visual anchors such as the BEMA, the ARC, and service leaders. Doing this helps maintain a sense of reverence and continuity for viewers while discouraging would-be swatters looking to disrupt and intimidate. Also, are you employing good cyber hygiene on your websites? Something that's often overlooked. Are you using or contemplate using ticketing services? In a few minutes, you'll be hearing from one of my trusted counterparts from CSI's own security program on why this is so important and how to implement this process if you don't do so now. These aren't all nice to haves. They're part of a layered security plan. And don't underestimate the power of conducting a run, hide, fight active shooter training in your own building. The advantage are tangible. Your congregants learn how to react under stress, and your staff sees exactly how your specific spaces affect response. The point here is not to scare you, but to empower and remind you that the Jewish institutions face a wide range of threats. Vandalism, theft, protests, arsons, and yes, even shootings. We can't predict which one we'll face, but we can be ready by planning for all of them as best as possible. So let's review again. The most important things you can do right now in the weeks leading up to the high holidays. First, check your perimeter. The basics still matter. Second, train your greeters and ushers to trust their instincts. Behavior is the giveaway. Everyone connected to your synagogue needs to be alert as well. Third, dust off your basic and emergency policies and procedures. They exist for a reason. And lastly, remember that threats come in many forms. Don't get complacent or think it won't happen here. In the many run, hide, fight active shooter presentations my deputy and I perform throughout the year, a big chunk of our PowerPoint deals with complacency and something called normalcy bias, a cognitive bias which leads people to disbelieve or minimize threat warnings. We all just recently watched witnesses to that horrible church shooting in Minneapolis last week, telling reporters that they discounted the pops they were hearing as gunfire initially. Look, the high holidays are a time of joy and community, but they're also a time when Jewish institutions are more visible and more crowded than ever. The best way we honor our communities is by making sure people can gather safely and without fear. I'll leave you with this. In most cases I've worked, people and places were successfully victimized because of complacency, the real enemy in one form or the other. These next few weeks are the moment to tighten up procedures, refresh training, and build relationships with your local law enforcement partners. Because once the shofar blows, it's too late to ask, are we ready? Once again, thank you to Ms. Silber and his entire team for having me here today.
Thank you, Tim. That was the real deal, exactly what we wanted to hear. There's the things we can do now. There's simple measures. We just have to be aware and get everything ready. So thank you so much. On top of that, I'm a constituent of Tim's. While I work for CSI New York, I know I'm in good hands. So thank you for doing that with us today.
Thank you, Dove.
Next up, we have Bill Hayes presenting, backed by popular demand, on using the ticketing system and access control. We've done this presentation a few times, but haven't new and updated. But real quickly, while he pulls up his slides, William Hayes is the Westchester Bronx Regional Security Director for the Community Security Initiative of New York. Mr. Hayes served as police officer for nearly 30 years, serving in a wide range of assignments, including patrol officer, certified training instructor, pilot, patrol supervisor, detective bureau commander, and chief of police before retiring in 2014. From 2014 to 2018, he served as the executive director of the Westchester Intelligence Center, the WIC, a partnership between the Westchester County District Attorney's Office and the New York, New Jersey high-intensity drug trafficking area. There, he led a team of sworn and civilian personnel providing criminal intelligence, crime analysis, and investigative support using cutting-edge technologies to over 40 law enforcement agencies at the local, state, and federal levels. Mr. Hayes holds a bachelor's degree in criminal justice from Mercy College, a master's degree in management from the Johns Hopkins University, and a second master's degree in national security studies from the Naval Postgraduate School, Center for Homeland Defense and Security. He is also a graduate of the FBI National Academy 226th session. And with that, I turn it over to you, Bill.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Tim, for that. And I think Tim's presentation really kind of lays the groundwork for, I'm going to kind of zero in and put a magnifying glass on one specific aspect of the preparations you should be taking in preparation for the holidays. Generally, we give broad recommendations. There's a lot of things to talk about. Tim mentioned the perimeter, right? That outermost layer of defense. Moving inward towards the building, we need to talk about access control. And really, attacks fail or succeed on the quality of access control. And again, the success of our access control procedures in part can fail due to complacency. They can succeed with some preparation, but more specifically within the domain of access control, a lot of questions come to us about how do I do that? I recognize the need to control access into my building. How do I do that? And what a lot of organizations do during the high holidays, because attendance is far in excess typically of what a typical Shabbat service is going to be. This is a special time of year. It's a busy time of year, and the volume of people in the facility is at its greatest this time of year. So how do we manage that? And my presentation is really drawn from a combination of recommended best practices from the security field and also feedback from my own catchment area, from executive directors and temple administrators that have had to do this themselves. They're truly the boots on the ground, and they share their experiences with me. They share their experiences with each other. And if you're not already doing that with other congregations in your geographic area, it's probably a good idea to start now, because the information you have, the experiences you have, can go a long way to keeping the community broadly secure. Before we even begin, I just want to lay a little bit of a foundation. You have to understand the importance of event access control. If we take actions without an objective, our energy is wasted. So we have to make sure that we're focused on a particular objective. The reason we want to control access is we've got to make sure the good guys get in without too much trouble, and we want the bad guys to stay out. So only authorized individuals should gain access to your facility. And this is going to not only enhance security physically and in an actual sense, it also instills a sense of reassurance on those in attendance so they can focus on the joy and the solemnity of the event without having to worry about what's happening over my shoulder, who's going to sneak up behind me and disrupt or maybe even hurt somebody. And of course, from a practical standpoint, from a pragmatic standpoint, you've got to have a system that works, that doesn't create bottlenecks, It doesn't open you up to unauthorized entry, and it boosts everybody's confidence in a successful event. And think about this, historically, the most successful attacks have occurred because of improper access control. Tree of Life, Poway, Muncie, we can come up with a pretty long list, and the failure of access control is what contributed to the success of the attack. An interesting success story was in Halle, Germany during the high holidays in 2019, where really good access control policies and procedures and good physical access control prevented a tragedy from happening at a synagogue there. So we generally talk about defense in depth. The 4 Ds is something that I use all the time when I teach because it's easy to remember. And this is really speaking towards our objective. We have to decide what our objective is. We generally would prefer to deter an attack. There are cases where we can't. We want to then be able to detect an attack, and we can do that through a variety of means, and that's not really the focus of this presentation. But the most important part of these 4 Ds that we're going to talk about today is the deny part. We want to be able to deny unauthorized persons from entry so that we don't have to get into the mode where we have to defend ourselves. And remember this phrase, the best attack is the one that never happens. We would prefer that you never have to be in a position where you have to defend yourself because you've done all the other things to hopefully deter or detect and ultimately deny an attacker access to the target. So, ticketing systems. Well, why do we need that ticketing system? What's the objective? For some, very few, it could be a revenue stream, particularly in the entertainment field. In a lot of cases with synagogues, especially during the high holidays, there's got to be a way of assigning limited seating. High holiday attendance is going to exceed typically the capacity of your building. So there's got to be a way of organizing that. And then from a security perspective, the box on the right is the most important. We want to make sure the good guys get in and we leave the bad guys outside. So think of access control as a pre-clearance tool. If anybody out there listening has TSA pre-check, that is a system whereby the air transportation system pre-vets you through background checks and fingerprints so that they already know that you're coming, they know that you're not the bad guy, and that provides the security apparatus at airports to get you through security in an expedited fashion. Think about your ticketing system for your congregation as kind of a TSA pre-check and a system that you can positively vet the people that are coming into your facility. And this is especially important during the high holidays because you have people that may not be regular attendees, you may not recognize them, yet they are members of your congregation or guests of members of your congregation. So we got to make sure that we have a way to verify that they are who they are. And then, of course, we'll talk briefly about walk-ins or first-timers because there's an issue that has to be dealt with as well. So I like to break this approach into 2 different phases. We've got the pre-arrival phase, which is where people would purchase or somehow or another get tickets assigned to them. And the second phase of access control will be the actual arrival at the site. So we'll talk first about the pre-arrival stage. A few things that you can do to set up your access control or your ticketing system. A lot of you have websites. In fact, most congregations that I deal with have some social media presence. There is one method there that you can use to have people register for your event for high holiday services, either through a paywall or some type of a member portal where it's password protected and only members that have been vetted can get access behind that paywall. You have to have a system to identify or distinguish between your regulars. Let's put them in the knowns bucket versus unknowns at the time of purchase. Are these people that are trying to come to your service, are they congregants? Are they members? Are they guests? Will you require, and these are good practices, do you require, if they're not a member, do you require a reference, right? I'm a guest of so-and-so. Or are they referred to you by somebody? Do they have to name somebody? Or do you have to have somebody inside the congregation vouch for them if they've never been there before? Do you maintain a membership list of members of the congregation and cross-check your high holiday registration against that membership list? Every hoop that you put up, every step in the vetting process, while not to the point of inconvenience, should be a method of deterring somebody from attempting an attack on your facility. Not all facilities or not all congregations charge a fee. Some do, some don't. But if you do charge a fee for your high holiday services, how are you collecting that fee? Credit card and Venmo are great means of validating ID. Typically, an attacker is not going to want to telegraph who they are, provide legitimate ID, or credit card account numbers, name, addresses, and things like that. So there's another way of deterring somebody who shouldn't be at your services by using those technologies to collect payment. And of course, a disclaimer on your website or in your printed literature should always have words to the effect that every purchase will be verified, all registrations will be verified, even if, regardless of the system you're using, it's a good thing to put out there because it is another method of deterring somebody who may not be authorized to be there that's trying to infiltrate your facility. And of course, communicate all your policies. Every year, CSI assists in preparing security for the Celebrate Israel Day Parade in New York City. We work really hard to ensure that the parade organizers put out a list of things that aren't to be brought to the venue, procedures for making entry into the venue, so that all of the expectations that the security folks have and that the leadership of the congregation have or of the event have are clearly communicated to those in attendance, so that there's no mystery, there's no confusion. And that should cover everything from parking, whether or not you let people bring bags into your facility, banners. If you're going to require ID, which is a good practice, that should be communicated in advance. And how will you handle walk-ins? And I'm going to talk more about walk-ins in another segment of this presentation. So you basically have to divide folks into what we call buckets, 3 buckets. No unauthorized person should be able to enter your presence or your premises. So in the universe of all arrivals, there are people that you know, they're members, they're regulars. There are people that you don't know. They've never been to your facility before. They've never attended services. Maybe they're a guest, maybe they're a walk-up, and they're purely unknowns. And then you have folks in the middle that fall into not either one of those categories, but they're kind of in the middle. They're known unknowns. These might be guests of a member, but they've never been there before. Someone that's with a legitimate purpose, but you actually don't know who they are. And you have to come up with systems to treat each of these populations differently. You've got to be able to divide those arrivals into those buckets, develop a screening mechanism or a screening profile for each bucket, and then have the ability or the flexibility of mind to change those profiles as the threat changes. And that's part of what we refer to as protective intelligence. Our intelligence desk informs those of us in the field and in turn the community on what's going on in the world, what's going on in the country, the region, so that we can develop timely and appropriate security recommendations. So that's phase 1, the pre-arrival phase. How about on the day of? What are we doing to verify tickets? Do you have sufficient personnel on hand to be able to go through a list? Do you hand out physical tickets? Are they numbered? Do you use an electronic ticketing system? There are a lot of technologies out there. There are services of special event organizers that will run an access control system for you, even on a temporary or ad hoc basis. There are software programs out there. And then there's the tried and true clipboard with a list. Whatever system you use, have a system. Will you require ID? We recommend it. What sort of screening will you have in place for prohibited items? And then how are you going to handle the different buckets? So it's recommended that you have multi-tiered check-ins for your knowns, for your unknowns, and for your known unknowns. And some really good ideas from the field that I've seen are a lot of congregations, or some congregations that I deal with, they'll send out an email with a barcode or a QR code, and upon arrival at services, somebody's there with a scanner. Others are given a name tag as the ticket that they're mailed to them in advance. Other organizations that I deal with use colored lanyards to identify and distinguish between members, staff, and guests. And that color code is known by the people that are organizing the event. And in all cases, recognizing arrivals with a roster. So one thing you have to be considerate of, if you're dealing with technology is a great thing. Consider it a tool. It's not the be all end all. Your access control system should be adaptable because the needs of your event are going to be variable. Whether it's a sudden change in the layout of your venue or an unexpected increase in attendance, your technology should be flexible enough to accommodate those changes. And by technology, I'm incorporating everything from pen and paper to fancy barcode systems and computerized systems. If you have existing event management tools that you use, or a customer database or member database, it's really helpful if the system you use can integrate with that database. And then think about what happens if you have an unanticipated interruption. What kind of offline solution or offline capability does your technology have? What if the power fails? What if the internet goes down and you can't access an electronic database that's hosted in the cloud? So while technology is a powerful tool, relying solely on online systems can be risky, and they're costly. There is a cost for all of these technologies. So using an access control app that can scan tickets is great, but it should be able to perform that whether or not the internet is up or down. So you should have contingency plans for any access control failures. Also on the day of walk-ups, this is probably one of the most difficult and slippery decisions or issues to deal with, because you want to be open, you want to be welcoming, you want people to want to come to your congregation, you want them to join potentially your congregation, and you want guests of members to walk away feeling good about their experience there. So how do we deal with walk-ups, the people that clearly fall into the unknown bucket? Will you permit walk-ups? And some congregations do, but that has to be done with some deliberation, with some thought. How will you identify someone who just walks up without pre-registering and says they want to get into your services? Will you positively ID them? Will you screen them? And then ultimately a decision has to be made whether or not to admit them. Will they have to provide references? Do visitors or non-members have to be escorted when they're entering your facility? And all of these decisions are difficult. Feelings can be hurt if they're not handled with tact. So in all cases, those decisions, those protocols have to be made before the day of. You also have to decide who has the authority and responsibility for the final decision. And this has to be clearly communicated to the entire team in advance of the event. And typically what we're talking about is somebody shows up. This is an atypical, you've got, members and guests showing up, showing their tickets, and then you have a walk up. And those responsible for screening shouldn't have to I use the term hold the bag or be responsible for that decision. That type of decision should be escalated to someone who has authority to say yes or no whether or not somebody is going to be admitted. So it has to be decided in advance who's going to resolve those escalations. And if a decision maker isn't designated, confusion is going to result, and sometimes a dangerous mistake can happen. And if you don't err on the side of caution, somebody that should not be let into your synagogue will wind up being inside. So these decisions have to be made in advance, and somebody who is usually an executive level member of the leadership of the synagogue should be that decision maker, that designated decision maker for that day. So some general recommendations, including ticketing and beyond. You've got to make sure that your access points are staffed. You want to have that perimeter integrity maintained before, during, and even after the event as people are leaving, right up until the last person leaves. So we want to make sure that we have adequate staffing for our points of entry. And every visitor that comes into the service or the event space comes through some sort of controlled entrance. So we want to have that staffing for entry. We also want to facilitate the orderly exit of attendees should there be an emergency, whether that's a tornado, a power failure, a fire alarm, or something like that. So make sure that you inspect your emergency exits to allow for the free flow of attendees. I go into a lot of buildings and I find that the emergency exits oftentimes are used for, because they're kind of out of the way, maybe at the end of a stairwell or a hallway. A lot of times they're used for storage, and the emergency exits are blocked. They're not accessible as they should be. Of course, screen those visitors and attendees prior to arriving at the building to make sure that they're not bringing in any unwanted items. And by screening, it could be anything from a visual inspection. It could be a bag search, or in some cases, metal detectors or handheld wands. But remember, if you're hiring law enforcement to provide security for your event, typically they're not going to be the ones to conduct those searches. So you're either going to have a security contractor or in-house security personnel, or somebody that's designated to do those things. But generally, the police will not do that, in part for legal reasons, the Fourth Amendment, and also whoever's doing the search is not giving their full attention to perimeter security. So you have to have adequate personnel on hand to take care of those things. Also, like I said before, be prepared to deny entry to those who don't adhere to your policies. And that person who is the decision maker for the day has to be clearly identified. Obviously, we want to have, if parking is an issue, if people drive to your synagogue, make sure that we have adequate parking, and we secure those parking areas and have somebody paying attention to the vehicles while they're unattended to make sure all those cars are there. And I finally want to touch on outdoor events and services. A lot of buildings don't have the capacity to handle high holiday attendance. So a lot of services are moved outdoors to outside structures or venues. And you have to consider what type of a structure that you're going to use. And a lot of times it's a tent, and that's fine. But soft structures like that, don't provide the hard protection that a building does. You're going to have to consider that, maybe push out your perimeter, create visual barriers. You have to worry about the weather. How will you evacuate those places. You want to control the flow of personnel coming and going or visitors coming and going. Make sure you have signage, trained personnel, layered security, clearly defined boundaries on your perimeter, and all the other things there on that list. In terms of best practices, you want to do things in advance. Tim's focus was on what are we doing in the weeks leading up to the high holidays, and this is dovetailing straight off of that, those recommendations. You want to be able to get out in front of these things now. There are still a few short weeks left, so we want to make sure that you're doing all your pre-event planning and testing now, specifically thinking about access control and how you're going to ticket your attendees. And then once your systems are in place or decided upon, you want to make sure that you clearly train your staff in communication. A lot of my congregations do, they have either an ad hoc or a year-round usher team or greeters, and they have a pre-event briefing in the weeks leading up to the high holiday services where everybody knows what their role is. Roles are clearly identified, procedures are clearly communicated. And in some cases, I've even been brought in to do refresher training on what to do if there's an emergency, like an active shooter or something along those lines. And you want to have policies and procedures in place to deal with unexpected situations and emergencies. Yes, security events specifically come under our wheelhouse, and that's what we primarily focus on. But don't forget the other things too, like weather, power, fire, and all the other hazards that can screw up your event. So what to do now? Use the next weeks to plan and train your team. Make those decisions on the important policy decisions that have to be made. Clearly identify the roles of everybody that's going to be on the team and communicate them clearly across all of the disciplines, whether they're security personnel, facilities personnel, administrators, and so on and so forth. And then rehearse, do a walkthrough. I have a daughter that's an entertainer, and they constantly are doing walkthroughs or run-throughs of whatever presentation or performance is going to take place. The high holiday services are a performance. This is your Super Bowl, and Super Bowl teams practice and rehearse every day. It's worth the time and effort to do a run through on how your event is going to take place. And while you're doing that, play the what if game. What if someone shows up unannounced? What if we detect a suspicious package? What if there's a severe thunderstorm and we're having services outside in a tent? And so on and so on and so on. And for each of those what ifs, come up with contingencies or mitigations to deal with those issues as they arrive, so that confusion doesn't reign during the stress of the event or during the stress of a real emergency. So with that, I just want to thank you all for listening. Appreciate your attendance here today. We've got quite a few people here from all over the region. We're here at your service. We have regional directors throughout our catchment area, including myself, and we'll be glad to help you drill down into the details offline should you have any questions about access control and ticketing. So back over to you, Dov. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Well said. It's almost like the Super Bowl. It's our Super Bowl. With that, those of you familiar, know we kind of have like a sandwich set up to our monthly webinars, and we like to close out top piece of the bread or the bottom, however you want to look at it, is a quick grant update. We have the best in the business, the guru himself, David Pollock. It's been a wild year on following the nonprofit security grant program. Things are changing a lot. There's a lot of unknowns, but we'll do our best to get it to you. And of course, this information is always on our website, CSI-NY.org, but we also like to make sure we can hear from David direct to all of us. So with that, David, thank you.
Thank you, Dov. By the way, I even posted the URL, csi.org/security grants, and everything that we have, I constantly updated. I even updated it this morning. So go ahead. I also updated it this morning, but in reality, very little has changed. Number one, timing. The best odds for the application process being available, the odds are it'll happen in October. And the odds are that you will have very little time to do your applications. So what we advise is for you to go to the CSI-NY.org website, download our assistance, which is tentative until we see the final rules, but they're probably very, very close to what the final rules are. Download the 2025 investment justification, because that's out. So you can start answering all the questions now. Of course, in New York, one has to be pre-qualified. Sometimes pre-qualification is a struggle. If you are not pre-qualified when in New York, Tim, you're very lucky. New Jersey doesn't make you do these things. But if you're not pre-qualified when they roll out the applications, odds are you will not be pre-qualified at the deadline, and odds are your application will be thrown out. So make sure that you follow all the recommendations that we put up there. We are getting questions about what's going to happen with the New York State hate crimes grant. Our best guess is they'll come out sometime in January. Could be they do it a little bit later in December, earlier in December, later in February. But, essentially the hate crimes grants will follow the federal grants. Finally, there's been a lot of discussion about terms and conditions. DHS has added 3 terms and conditions that never existed before. Essentially, organizations that win a nonprofit security grant 2025 grant will be required to certify that they will not, number 1, operate programs that advance DEI. Number 2, engage in a discriminatory prohibited boycott, which is generally thought of as boycotting Israel. And number 3, operate any program that benefits illegal immigrants or incentivizes illegal immigrations. Now, those are a lot of words. Understand, number 1, CSI and all of the other major organizations urge synagogues to seek federal security grants despite the terms. Everyone is working to clarify what the terms and conditions really mean and how they will be applied. We don't know exactly what will happen, but there's an article that came out today that is, there's a link on the website. We have a FAQ, a frequently asked question, dealing with the terms and conditions and discussing this more. But if I don't shut up quickly, Dov is going to retaliate. So I am going to pass the hat back to Dov. I don't see anyone posting any questions.
Thank you, David. Again, much of what David spoke to is specific to the New York community, CSI New York, right? Our catchment from Albany to Montauk with some Southwest Connecticut. But obviously we know, and thank you to all the partners that join us from around the country, specifically, obviously, Northern New Jersey for this session, but we know from Michigan and Ohio and California. So thank you to everybody. Maybe, Seth, I think there are a few questions teed up. Maybe you have time for one question, but most importantly, I want to mention to everyone, go to our website, ny.org, to find your regional security director for specific questions. I mean, this was a ton of important, good information that I think everyone can take a few steps with at least to get in a good direction. And it's the real deal type of security advice. But go to CSI-NY, get to the right person. If you're outside of our area, we can help you get in the right direction too, if you get in touch with us. With that, Seth, if you're there, I think there were a few questions we were able to take. We'll pass maybe one to Bill and Tim, and then try to get out of here maybe a few minutes after 4.
So first question we have. So this I'll give to you, Bill. Can you help us understand how to verify people at the vetting stage? What's something that obviously shouldn't be approved? And what is the next action if you're not sure?
Okay, thanks, Seth. Yeah, good question. And that's probably one of the more difficult challenges in setting up your ticketing system is how do you know that you're verifying, or how do you verify that somebody's a good guy, right? The easiest bucket to deal with is your members, because you presumably have a membership list, and during the pre-arrival phase when people are buying tickets, you want to capture as much information as possible: name, address, telephone number, email. If they are members or claim to be a member, you reference that against your membership list. Some organizations that I deal with will require ID at the door to verify that they are who they say they are. If you are accepting payment for tickets, then using credit cards, Venmos, and so forth is another data point that you're capturing. And the reason it's good to capture all this information is an attacker or a nefarious actor, a potential attacker or nefarious actor is going to be very reluctant to provide personal information. And each data point that you collect on a potential attendee is going to do more to further discourage somebody from who's not authorized from trying to get into your event. We do it, even this Zoom meeting, behind the scenes, we have somebody that's kind of deciding who we're going to admit. I saw it happening on my screen because I have host privileges. If we don't recognize an address or a phone number and that they're not on our pre-registration list, they're not getting into our meeting. And you can apply that framework that we're using in the virtual world to the real world. Trust your gut. If you're not comfortable about granting a ticket to somebody, then don't. See if you can arrange a personal phone call, some kind of personal contact with an individual that you think, hey, might be a member, might be a guest of a member. Walk-ups, the unknown buckets, it's a trickier situation. I know some congregations, they have a hard and fast rule that they just don't do new member orientations or they don't do new member welcomings during the holidays because there's just too much going on. It's too busy. They'll do new member tours, but when the holidays pass, during other parts of the year. Guests should be verified by a member. David, did you have something?
If someone insists on paying cash, that's a red flag. That's what
cash is a red flag, for sure.
you don't
Anything
want.
that tends to anonymize the person that wants to come to your event should be considered a flag. So, and don't be afraid to say no. That can be done in a tactful and diplomatic way. Think Disney, places like that, stadiums, theaters that, they train their people to be good communicators, and there are really nice ways to say no without hurting your reputation or hurting somebody's feelings. Thanks for the question.
Thanks, Bill. Dove, do we have time for one more?
Yeah, a blessing to everyone is that your services go under time, but it's important stuff. So let's do one more question.
Okay, so this will be the last question. Tim, I'm going to give this one to you. Do we need to have security guards or can volunteers suffice? Or do they work together?
Good question. As always, let me answer the back part of that first. They work together all the time in my area. We have some synagogues that employ police officers, CSS individuals or volunteers from that respective synagogue, and also private armed security, most of which are usually retired cops. A lot of this has to do with budget considerations, for sure. High holidays, if I would always stress to have armed guards, at least one armed guard in whatever form. In my area, police tend to be a little more expensive than a retired police officer from a private security firm. So a lot of facilities go that route, but you should have volunteers. That's what CSS, CSS has a big presence in our area. And whenever I get a call from a synagogue or a facility that wants to have their own people volunteer, but want to get them some type of training, I always refer them to our partners at CSS to get the power of hello training, situational awareness training. That's really good for just the ordinary average congregation member to have, to be perfectly honest with you. Again, high holidays, you want to try to get an armed guard, but you can do any combination thereof as long as there's communication between those individuals. And we see that in our area all the time, and it works pretty flawlessly. Whoever asked that question, feel free to reach out to me if it's in my area. I'd be happy to walk you through it and get the right fit for you.
Thank you, Tim. Dove, with that, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Perfect. Thanks, Tim, and thank you, Seth. Real quickly again, CSI-NY.org for these recordings, for the grant information, for all the other things we do, including the trainings that we provide directly to organizations. Obviously, CSI New York and Southwest Connecticut, we're talking about our catchment area. Obviously, our partners like Tim does it in his AOR as well, from active threat to in situational awareness and similar trainings. On that note, there will be no October session because the first Tuesday next month falls out on the first days of Sukkot. It's also 10/7. Unfortunately, the world that we're still living in to a degree, so I didn't want to discount that. But we wish everyone a happy New Year, Shana Tova. And please feel free to reach out. That's what we're here for. Our teams, our partners to best support you. So thank you.